Artpop dropped on November 6, 2013. The fourth Gaga album, it remains one of her most contentious records to date. From the middling critical reception to disappointing sales to fans being completely at a loss as to what this era even meant, this is an era that some people would just want to forget happened, but I consider it an underrated and critical turning point in Lady Gaga's career. Guys, I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna have to break the format because I want to clear up a lot of tea about what happened behind the scenes. We can't truly appreciate what this era was without really learning what happened behind the scenes. Let's go back to before the Artpop era even started. So, while on the Born This Way tour, Gaga was working with her producers on early cuts for the records, over 8 legs and 98 shows, but one critical event would be the nexus point for the Artpop era and its messiness. Sometime in February 2013, Lady Gaga suffered a critical hip injury that would lead to the cancellation of the rest of the Born This Way ball tour. Gaga would end up developing synovitis and a labral tear to her hip. She would later recover after a surgical procedure, but many fans started to think, is this the end of Lady Gaga? And the general public soonly followed right after. Okay, in a callback to the Greek theming of the album, I always found it kind of ironic that Lady Gaga would end up kind of almost foreshadowing her entire career through the paparazzi video, and also in a statement that she made to a fan at a meet and greet, she said that Artpop would be an era that would emulate a phoenix rising from the ashes just days before she broke her hip. How scary is that? That's pretty scary. This tragic accident would force her into a 6-month hiatus where, honestly, she kind of made the most of her time. She took her time working with the house, researching and learning about literature, music, art, the meaning of art, what it related, why things are popular, why things work. Most of the aesthetics for this era and ideas were conceived around this period. Okay, so here's one thing that I think people don't really understand about Lady Gaga, and it even continues into now. Gaga, especially in her early career, is a perfectionist, and that was an asset during her early rise. Her meticulous attention to detail and dedication to putting things out there that she was truly proud of makes her what she is today, and it would end up being the downfall of this era in many ways. There was so much pressure to get this era right and win back this whole narrative that Gaga was stoppable. She wanted to prove herself as this titan of music, and she still is, but this underlying tension and pressure eventually did get to Gaga and her team. Normally, this sort of challenge of proving people wrong seems like a motivational thing, like in a movie, but it eventually devolved into confusion, frustration, and oddly enough, interesting real-life art. So work on the album proceeded as usual. Gaga worked with many names like Zedd, Madian, David Guetta, remember him, will.i.am, Infected Mushroom, and DJ White Shadow, who previously worked on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Theme song, which is still a slapper to this day. For a moment, things were starting to look like they were going to go right and things were going to totally go off without a hitch, but they weren't. One of the linchpins for this era, in my opinion, is the messy single choices. Now, I have no qualms with Applause. I adore the song. It charted high. It even hit number 4. It would have charted even higher if it hadn't been forced to compete with Katy Perry's Unstoppable Roar at the time. The promo cycle it received was actually really inspired, and I really do like the performances from that mini era for Applause. With all that being said, I want you guys to all know that how this single was chosen was an entire mess. It was rumored that Gaga herself wanted another more controversial track to open up the era. She wanted Aura, then titled Burqa, which mysteriously leaked as a demo in early August, before Applause itself leaked. This early version titled Burqa featured a little bit of differences from the final release copy. Some say that the plan was to complete a paparazzi telephone trilogy with its music video. That would never come to pass. Some devoted little monsters do believe that Gaga herself leaked Aura to kind of tease the public and see how well it'd be received. It ended up not really making that much noise amongst people who were outside of the fan base, so Applause was chosen instead, and the leak forced them to basically drop it. And this wasn't the only time that picking a single ended up being this controversial thing, because single 2 was just as disjointed. Gaga presented her fans with the choices of Manicure, Sex Dreams, Aura, and Swine as options, only to choose Venus, only to cave to public perception of Do What You Want featuring R. Kelly. I really think that it highlighted different priorities between the label and Gaga's vision and fans. Everyone was really confused. There are like these three pulling forces. We need the album to be successful, so it was smart to change the single to Do What You Want, but it clearly didn't vibe with what Gaga had planned for the era, and you can tell that from a managerial standpoint, reining in Gaga's vision and trying to shift this era and be agile ended up backfiring because she didn't like what was being presented, and ultimately no one was happy with the final result. But the real battle that was happening behind the scenes, in my opinion, and from the evidence that we've collected as a fandom, that the two forces that were really battling each other at the time were Lady Gaga herself and her then manager of 6 years, Troy Carter. I think we need to talk about the manager split, because this split is ultimately why I think this era ended up being messy, why it didn't go off without a hitch, and ultimately why this era ended so fast. So essentially, this manager split happened because Gaga and Carter were facing so much turbulence in the lead up to the album's release. It was rumored that they had a full-on ugly fight on the night of her 2013 VMAs performance of Applause. One really interesting factor that I can see being on Carter's side of this fight was that Gaga's perfectionism wasn't allowing the album to actually finish on time. The album was cutting it extremely close in its mastering phase due to Gaga's perfectionism. Ultimately, tracks were being shuffled back and forth if insiders and leakers are to be believed. All of this built up to this insurmountable pressure, and it all fell apart the night of Gaga's performance of Dope at the YouTube Music Awards, just days before Artpop's release. She was extremely emotional during that performance. 4,000 people actually clicked off because they were disturbed at what they were seeing. She was just on the verge of tears. She was tearing up. She dedicated it to her fans. That was the night that Carter actually split with Gaga. Now, I can't really attest to anything. I do not know the full story of this. This is just speculation, but it is an emotional thing to really go through, especially when it's with someone who's been with you since day one before you hit it big. There's a lot of emotions there, a lot of mixed emotions, and even if there are contrasting visions, especially for an era, you have to understand that ultimately there's a relationship there, a friendship between a manager and their client that's akin to a friendship or a partnership, or I don't even know how to describe it, but it had to be something really bad. Then the album dropped, and the effects of Carter's split ended up actually affecting a lot of the materials that were supposed to come with it. A lot of those materials never materialized. It was under Carter's management that the infamous Artpop app that accompanied the release was set up. Gaga would end up disowning it on Twitter a couple of months later, and it never got the updates it was meant to get. There was supposed to be something called Gaga Vision, which would show performances. There were supposed to be Artpop Side B tracks, essentially, Artpop Act 2 tracks that never got dropped on there. Before I completely forget about it, I want to talk about Brooklyn Nights, which was supposed to be released on the app. It's a really good track. It was supposed to be on the record. It was competing with Mary Jane Holland for the track 12 slot, but ultimately it was passed on. I think the song is so nostalgic and so magical compared to some of the tracks that actually did make the record. I wish had been included. It's just so thoughtful and nostalgic, and just, I love the transition from the joy at the beginning to a bittersweet sadness at the end. But just a quick aside, I'm going to pull up a document right now showing the things that we were supposed to get on the app. Look at this extensive list of opportunities and interesting content that we never got because the partnership fell apart. And it's none of their faults. It's just really sad seeing what we could have gotten. Likewise, this was the original schedule for the album promotional cycle as leaked by Twitter. We need to take it with a grain of salt because we don't know how true this is, how filled out this is, but look at how much more organized it was. I'm not going to chime in and say again, I have no clue what kind of beef was happening, but entirely different visions. I feel like Carter had a more organized sort of view, whereas Gaga was really trying to find the right blend between artistic merit and commercial value. But in this industry, commercial value is everything. It will ultimately trump an artist's vision, and that's partially why I feel so bad about the Artpop era. And it's like a complete shame because I think they both had the same vision for this album, or at least the same vision of success, but not the same way of getting there. This is a following quote from a Billboard article covering the split. I think that it particularly rings true about the bittersweet nature of this era. It says, Gaga told me when we first met, people torched me for speaking my mind on Born This Way. I just want to make hit pop songs with Artpop. She knows she has nothing without great songs. This quote came from a close source that probably knew both sides, and it really just speaks to the pressure behind this album, behind the cycle, and how it ended up falling apart. Now, I'm just going to briefly talk about the rest of the cycle. Artpop was relatively short-lived for a Gaga cycle. After the album dropped, there was only one more single, Guy, which got a music video, which incorporated some of the other songs on the records that may have been singles at some point, but weren't fully conceived. This didn't chart high. There's a pretty good tour that included a lot of the cities that Gaga had to cancel because of the hip injury, and then she disappeared from the pop world for a while. And now it's the moment you guys have been waiting for. I'm here to talk about the musical legacy of Artpop. I'm going to cover a bunch of the deep cuts, some of the singles. I don't know. I feel like I want to take my time and really talk about nearly every track on this record if I can, because I owe it to this album. This is sort of the precursor to what we're getting now in Chromatica, and it deserves its just desserts compared to other eras. I feel like a lot of people just forget about this era and the music that came behind it. You know, to begin the album with Aura is a very brave move. I think that this mix of mariachi and EDM music, it's very loud and audacious, and it takes this Western style guitar, Gaga's distorted vocals, a maniacal laugh. It's a very empowering track. Weirdly enough, I think that there's very deep feminist themes in the song, which are overlooked by how irreverent it is towards burqas. The original title was Burqa, and you can definitely see that the change to Aura possibly was a cop-out, but in other ways it could also describe this sort of spiritual veil over her creativity and her mind. Aura's always been such an interesting song to me. It was my favorite. I kind of wish it had been the first single, though I understand the concerns behind its commercial viability. It's very brave. It's very forward. It's an audacious album opener, but as a single, I do not imagine it would have performed as well, though the music video, which was rumored to be a continuation of the Telephone series, I wish we had gotten that. I don't know where Gaga would have fell into this sort of storyline, but very, very interesting track and a very powerful opening to the album. I think the repetition of dance, sex, art pop, and tech at the end, that those sort of statements just preview what this record's going to be. Oh my god, I just realized I forgot to mention Volantis, the flying dress. Can you guys remember that? There was a flying dress. I think that was the tech aspect of Artpop as well as the failed app, but you know, can't blame her for trying. The next track is Venus. This was supposed to be single number 2. It's a really interesting track. I'm gonna keep on saying things are interesting, but this one's really genuinely cool in that it samples a French electro-pop duo song, Rocket Number 9. It was a cover of Sun Ra's song, actually, and she got a credit for that, which is pretty cool. Not only is it a reference to the birth of Venus, it's also a reference to David Bowie's stylings. You can definitely see the influence of synth pop, dance pop, and glam rock. There's a lot of hooks in the song, and honestly, the mix reviews were totally fake. It's a catchy song. The lyrics are very avant-garde. The song peaked and debuted somewhere in the top 40, which is pretty impressive, a showing of her power at the time. It's a very evocative and image-filled song that really tries to tackle the senses. I really think that the bridge kind of tells the story of what she's trying to do here, and it ties back to the literary understanding that Gaga gleaned during her time when she was out of action. I think there's a very interesting touch on Greek and Roman mythology. The chorus really does bang, honestly. Like the "when you touch me, I die a little inside," it really hooks into your mind, just the way that she intonates and sings over the beat. Overall, it's a really good track. I think it could have done well on the charts if it had been promoted. I'm not sure if it would have reached the heights of Do What You Want, but I do believe that there were more visuals and more of a concept here to work with other than Do What You Want, which never had its video released because it was directed by Terry Richardson and also features R. Kelly. And it's for the best we never got that music video, though I wish we would gotten a music video for Venus. Next track has to be Guy. It's Girl Under You. It's a power bottom anthem according to Genius. It's one of the first tracks to be recorded for the album actually, and apparently it's a feminist bop, which is pretty interesting. I think this song is really catchy. I saw a lot of critics say that the lyrics were pretty shallow, but I do believe that this is some sort of metaphor for the earth. You know, Mother Earth, Mother Nature, though I'm not going to wax poetic on here. Like, let's be honest, this is a really good sex jam. It was produced by Zedd, written with Gaga by Zedd, which is pretty interesting. I want to talk about the music video. I think the music video was somewhat of a cop-out. It featured a bunch of other songs on this album, as I mentioned before. I feel like it was sort of a last hurrah for the era, and while it does deliver some interesting visuals and interesting cameos from the Real Housewives, I do believe that we could have gotten better visuals for this record, but understandably, now that we know the context of what happened with her manager, it's very unfortunate because the song does deserve a little bit of a better music video. Sex Dreams is definitely a banger. I kind of wish it'd been a single. Then again, too brave for the public. I'm going to keep on reiterating this. I believe that a lot of the tracks on here could have smashed, but then again, it really depends on how the general public perceives you. And that was ultimately the death knell of this era, in addition to the managerial issues. Sex Dreams is about Gaga's erotic night dreams. You know, like, let's be honest here. It's pretty interesting because I did read into the lyrics and I gleaned that she's conversing with her boyfriend and her girlfriend. So it's really interesting, like her imaginary boyfriend and girlfriend. You know, this lustful fantasy is bisexual. So, you know, Gaga's reminding us she's bi. It's a pretty good song, all in all. I love the production here, how the drums go. It's very, very 80s, but also very modern. One thing I really find interesting is that the opening's very conversational. I do like that. It's very different in that. DJ Snake actually worked on this track, which is really interesting. Once again, Literature Gaga comes out. You could turn to stone, or The Color of Men Petrified by a Woman. That line in the bridge is a reference to Medusa the Gorgon, which is really like something that you would not have noticed if you were just listening to the song casually. I think the chorus really harkens back to the simplicity of the Fame eras, like both of them, both the Fame and the Fame Monster. This chorus easily could have fit into those albums, but without the context of literature and whatever Gaga was feeling in the moment of writing it. The next track is actually pretty controversial in that, like, I don't really see many people talk about it or remember it, though Gaga tried to make it a moment. It's called Jewels and Drugs, and it's a hip-hop trap sort of track. It has T.I., Too Short, and Twista, and it's essentially a pretty straightforward song about wanting someone's love. I don't really have much to say about it. I think the rap verses actually fit very well into here. I think Lady Gaga demonstrates a versatility. I don't think that the song would have charted that high. I always have to talk about the commercial viability, obviously. Ultimately, this is just a very straightforward, nice song. I consider it somewhat of an interlude because Manicure, the next track, is very hard-hitting, at least for me. Manicure stylized Man I Cure, which is somewhat pretentious looking back on it, but also just audacious in its nature. It's a very nice electro rock kind of song that sounds like something Lady Gaga would have released anyway. It's a pretty interesting track in that it's a metaphor about people wanting to be fixed either through love or through art or through physical appearance, which is a theme that Lady Gaga has dealt with in the past, but not to this level. I think the chorus is actually really touching in many ways. It's not too hammer over the head. It's avant-garde enough to kind of like work. It's many people kind of forget this track exists along with much more of the record, but I do believe that the song does have significance to her. I do think that its placement near the center of the record is pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting because it's like kind of this chanty, cheery song, but the subject matter is pretty deep, which is pretty odd, honestly. Nice contrast. And now we hit the most infamous track off this record, a track that has now been removed from every single printing, vinyl, digital release. It's Do What You Want featuring R. Kelly. This one is one of the most commercial songs on the entire record, and it was pretty obvious that when it was switched to a second single that they knew that this was going to be a hit to some sort of extent. And it is a very good song. I do not appreciate the inclusion of R. Kelly. I did not approve of it back in 2013. Knowing what I knew back then and knowing what we know now, it was not a right choice. Her defense of R. Kelly is something that many fans will drag her for, but she too did not have the evidence at the time, so understandable. I kind of find this track interestingly trendy because the sort of sound of dirty beats would end up being utilized on a couple of other more artist tracks. Style comes to mind by Taylor Swift. Honestly, if you guys do want to listen to this track, definitely listen to the Christina Aguilera remix. I think it adds a lot to the song, and the two of them sound delightful on that track. They definitely elevate each other on the record. It is rumored that there is a music video out there directed by someone who is pretty problematic, Terry Richardson, and it features R. Kelly, also problematic, but it wasn't released at the time because of many reasons. Apparently it was very controversial, the imagery was disturbing, and it would have damaged Gaga's career, so it was pulled. Barring the controversies behind the song and just looking at it sonically, I think it's actually a pretty good song. Though, once again, if I ever have to revisit this track, I revisited it myself with the Christina Aguilera track instead of listening to R. Kelly's version. The next track is the title track, Artpop, and it's essentially a manifesto about the combination of art and pop. If you read the lyrics in plain text, you can see that it's sort of a declaration of creation. I like to imagine this as somewhat of akin to when Athena came out of Zeus's mind. I know this sounds pretty pretentious, but I think that's the vibe that she was going for. When she says that my art pop could mean anything, I think she means it quite literally. It's asking us, beckoning us to understand this concept through our own lenses, ultimately mixing subtext and fantasy, like she mentions in verse 2, into its own creation. Something that I've always liked about pop stars, and I'm going to touch upon this in another video coming up pretty soon, is how they like to self-mythologize. I think they are modern day equivalents to the Greek gods in that they represent these giant ideals to us, and we compartmentalize values into their living and their legend, and we worship them and all that stuff. It's pretty interesting. Like there's a very keen sensibility there of idolatry and worship, which many may label disturbing, but I feel like it's a frequent anthropological pattern that we're just like meant to repeat over and over again. The metaphors and the depth of this album continue, even in tracks that we wouldn't really expect it. The next track is Swine, and it's a track about Lady Gaga's experiences and just the utter anguish that she felt after she had been assaulted at 19 by someone she won't talk about, but apparently it was a record producer. You can tell from the delivery of the music, the harsh industrial dubstep instrumental, that there's a lot of emotion here. It could easily have been converted into a rock song if you really think about it. When I first listened to this record, I really didn't even know what it was about. I just thought it was a song that went hard. But after learning the context behind what the song means to her, and analyzing that musical performance that she did where she had someone vomit stuff onto the stage, and Gaga, like, I finally get the song. You know, there's a lot of hard-hitting stuff on this album. It just really takes understanding context and reading things through in order to really get them. But that's the thing. I don't think pop music is something people really want to analyze or think about most of the time. We just want things to make us happy. Which is really ironic because she delivers a song that's just fun and energetic and great. It's Donatella, it's produced with Zed, and it's pretty iconic. She opens saying that she's blonde, she's skinny, she's rich, and she's kind of a bitch. And it's just this fun song about being bougie and fancy and enjoying the nice things in life. Donatella is an ode to the ultimate power bitch. I imagine her writing about an Anna Wintour type when it comes to the song. The next track is a continuation of those themes of enjoying opulence. It's a song called Fashion, and it was produced by will.i.am, surprisingly, and Lady Gaga herself. Writing was also done by David Guetta. It's pretty interesting because this was 2 years, maybe 3 years from the end era from the Black Eyed Peas. It's a pretty straightforward song about just being on top of the world in your fashion and transforming, using clothes and wigs and just having a good time with that. I really think the outro's pretty cool. It has will.i.am on it. This song kind of reminds me of Fashion Beats, which is a track on the underrated The Beginning album by the Black Eyed Peas, just in thematic areas. I think the next track also plays into the theme of physical pleasures. Instead, this one's about weed. It's called Mary Jane Holland, and it's essentially about an alter ego that comes out when Lady Gaga gets high off marijuana. The most interesting thing about this track is its production. It's very sonically different. It's experimental. There's a very interesting blend of guitars and synths and drums here. What I do like about this track is her ability to blend into another ego. I love when Lady Gaga takes personas. That's something that I really do miss from the older eras, something that we didn't really get much during the Joanne and A Star is Born sort of thing, because she was just playing one straight character, whereas in Artpop she diverges into many different forms throughout the entire tracks. Transformation is one of the motifs of Gaga's works. It's something that she even portrayed in one of her first acting roles in Machete Kills. She was a character called Le Chameleon, which was essentially this character whose face we didn't know, and one of her forms was Lady Gaga herself, which was pretty interesting. Very meta. The next track is Dope, and it is the only ballad on this entire album. The original title was I Wanna Be With You. And I think it's this song where she asks for atonement for her past. Whatever happened in the past stays in the past. That's what she's trying to portray here. This song actually peaked at number 8 because of how powerful it was in sales. All in all, it's a very heart-wrenching track, and knowing the context of that performance that she did at the YouTube Music Awards, dedicating it to her fans during a very tough time, a split with a manager, it makes me respect the song a lot more than I originally did. I normally would have skipped this track because it just didn't bang, but upon revisiting it for this video, I have an appreciation for it, which is very symbolic of my appreciation for this record. At the time of recording this audio, I asked you guys if I could conduct a poll asking for which track you wanted me to talk about the most, and the answer that I'd seen was Gypsy. Gypsy is ironically one of my favorite songs from the record. It was one of the songs on the first listen of this record all the way back in 2013 that really stuck with me. It's an autobiographical song for Gaga. about becoming an entertainer and traveling the world, but still trying to find ground in this world. But also contrasting that with an understanding that she may never have it. The soaring vocals, the lyricism, the instrumental, and the earnestness on this track, the ingenuity, the energy and the vibe, how honest she feels on this record, and how it's a blend of the best that she has to offer. I am sad that this was never a single and that this song remains a hidden gem amongst fans. I'm also kind of sad that this song is not the album closer. I feel like it is a very powerful thesis statement for a record that seemingly was all over the place unless you put all the parts together. It's so anthemic and oddly personal as a track, and I just have such a connection with this track. This is a track that I would play if I had won some sort of accolade or accomplished something in my life that I wanted, but also something in my life that made me realize that, oh shit, maybe I don't want to be alone forever, but I can be for this moment because something greater is waiting for me. It's a very euphoric track, and it's emblematic of the best of this era. And the final track is Applause. It was the first single. I don't really have much to talk about it, honestly. I think everybody's had to say their hot take on it. It's just a direct response against the general public, but ironically also a call for applause and an understanding of what it means to be a public performer, both on and off the camera. I think it's a very meta and fun song. Was a good first single choice now that I look back on it, though honestly I wish it had been a little bit braver. It's a good song. I like it. Well, if you have made it this far, 31 minutes into talking about Artpop, I could talk 2 hours about Artpop, honestly. I just want to say that this is a very understated, very underrated record that was unfortunately dealt really bad cards, bad timing, a general public that was essentially kind of bored and not necessarily in the mood to analyze text or literature, which she was giving us. Honestly, Artpop is less of a pop record and more of this kind of puzzle of sorts that we had to put together and understand. I really admire Lady Gaga's audacity to sort of believe in the general public and believe in her audience, to have the patience to sift through all of these meanings and whatever. But honestly, it's a good time. It's a good record, and I really do enjoy thinking about it. Once again, guys, thank you so much for watching my videos. My socials are down below. Quick announcement: on Friday, we're going to have a special party celebrating the release of Chromatica. I feel bad I wasn't able to make a Joanne or a Stars Born video. That may be coming in the future. I just wanted to focus all my time and effort on this Artpop video because I just had so much to say. And because I believe that this is a prelude to what we're going to get on Chromatica. Anyway, I'm having a special Twitch party, only on Twitch. It's not going to be on here, where we're going to stream the album and try to get it to #1. I hope that you guys show up. My Twitch link is in my bio and also on the channel page, and it should be linked down below. Join me Friday night, 11 p.m. We're going to be streaming the album as soon as it comes out, but right before, I'm going to share some fan art that people sent in. If anybody wants to send any fan art for me to show off, that would be great. James, who is a frequent lurker on my channel and also one of my favorite people to interact with on my live streams, which happen sporadically, honestly. He and I will be releasing some really interesting and really bad auto-tune covers. I hope you guys come and hear that. We really want to get this album to #1 and avenge Artpop. So thank you so much for coming, and I hope you guys have an awesome whatever and enjoy Chromatica. It's late when I recorded this.